Some years ago, I was visiting a friend in Munich. I could safely say that we were having a splendid time, marveling about the unique perks of the city, like how life ceases completely after 8 p.m., and how, thanks to its unshakable conservatism, Munich's subways still insist on having a human operator mumble these station names in a Bavarian accent so dense that no one who hasn't lived in Bavaria for the past 50 years has any faint hope of understanding. It was all fun and giggles until the moment we arrived at Odeonsplatz, a famous square where public demonstrations often take place. It just happened to be that one was taking place at that exact moment, something about the environment. My friend got excited and wanted to participate. I welcomed the idea and said, "I'll just wait for you over there, and then when you're done, we can continue with whatever we were going to do next." But my friend got angry and asked how could I not care about participating in the demonstration. I think I sealed my fate when I said that it just didn't mean anything. But to my friend, it meant everything, because it meant that I didn't care about the environment and that I am not a responsible member of society or something. Mind you, all my long-standing efforts with respect to the environment could not save my graces in that moment, like meticulously separating the recycling trash and removing the metal screws from glass bottles and the plastic from the paper bag and so on, like any good German would do. It was in that moment when I failed to feel the same way about a cause or to attach the same meaning to a random happening that pretty much ended our friendship. I'm pretty sure you experienced this in your life too, at a moment when you were expected to feel a certain way that you simply didn't, or maybe you simply don't feel strongly about things at all. And suddenly you are alienated from your group despite not having done anything particularly wrong. So why does society seem to punish lack of emotion or the wrong emotion so harshly? Why is feeling the right thing equated with goodness and morality? And why do we insist that every action or inaction must carry some kind of meaning behind it? I want to interrogate these questions in this video, and perhaps the answers are at no better place to be found than in Albert Camus' work, The Outsider. A novel that captures exactly what happens when someone refuses to play the game and is therefore cast as an outsider to his society. Do keep in mind that this is my own interpretation adapted for the purpose of this video: emotion, meaning, and morality. To understand just how deeply emotion shapes the idea of a good person, let's look at someone who lives entirely outside the system, Meursault, the protagonist of Camus' The Outsider, also sometimes translated as The Stranger. From the very first sentence in the novel, we are immediately introduced to the kind of person our Meursault is. My mother died today, or maybe yesterday. I don't know. Details. He's not being cruel or uncaring, but he genuinely is more absorbed in the sensory experience and immediate facts than reflection and emotional interpretation. He begins thinking about logistics, how he's going to get to the funeral, where to get his suit, and so on. When he finally makes it to the bus that goes to the old people's home where his mother's body lay, he starts thinking about how tired he was from rushing around in the heat. Rushing around, running like that, plus the bumpy ride, the smell of petrol, the sun's glare reflecting off the road, all that must have been why I felt so drowsy. I slept for nearly the whole journey. While another person might be wrapped up in the emotional gravity of the situation and processing their loss, he goes like, "Geez, it's pretty hot in here. And the smell of petrol isn't ideal either." And it doesn't get any better. When he gets to the old people's home and he's taken to the room where his mother's coffin lay, he refuses to see her and reaches for a cigarette instead. Then I wanted a cigarette, but I hesitated because I didn't know if I should smoke in front of Mama. I thought about it. It was of no importance whatsoever. And this is where his trouble will later begin. Because our reactions to events are rarely just private. They are part of a shared societal emotional narrative. When someone dies, you are meant to cry. You are meant to look devastated. But Meursault simply refuses to abide by the script. Not consciously or rebelliously even. He genuinely doesn't feel those layers of meaning in the first place. His life continues normally following the funeral, completely in the sensory. The heat, the brightness of the sun, the beautiful sunset, the cold evening, the tiredness, the hunger, and so on. He goes swimming the next day and meets a woman whose name is Marie. They go to watch a comedy movie later, and at a later point, they start dating. At some point, she asks him if he loves her. I replied, as I had once before, that didn't mean anything, but I was pretty sure I didn't love her. She asked if he wanted to marry her. He responds, I explained that it was of no importance whatsoever, but if that was what she wanted, we could get married. She presses further and asks if he would say yes to any other woman, to which he replies, of course. I mean, this is what every woman wants to hear. It's an absurdly honest answer, and that's exactly the problem. Because relationships don't tend to run on honesty alone. Realistically, they run on shared illusions, albeit not being recognized as illusions at all. They are mutually agreed upon meanings that both people decide are universal truths. Things like, I love you should mean unquestioning devotion, or the person I'm with should prefer me to everyone else, or if my partner really cared, they would know what to do. These aren't facts, they are stories we tell each other to make love feel stable and predictable. Somewhere in human history, it was decided that love should mean this and that, and it got passed on and propagated later by media. But Meursault simply doesn't participate in assigning these stories. People like him pretty much expose how much of our emotional world is built on collective meaning-making we picked up from around us. And it doesn't stop at that, it extends even to our way of approaching morality. We attach moral implications when others fail to adhere to the invented meaning we decided is the ground truth, when they don't feel as they ought to in a given situation. We begin to see this in the story when Meursault describes the attitude of one of his neighbors towards his dog, in a typical Meursault style, of course, simply narrating the facts. The man shouts at the dog, curses at him, beats him, and it goes on every day. And how does Meursault react? Celeste always says, it's awful, but when it's all said and done, no one really knows. Everyone in the neighborhood has an opinion about it. Everyone feels an instinctive need to moralize and call it awful. But to Meursault, no one really knows. Now this is an interesting one. To you and me, it's pretty straightforward. We see an old man beating his dog, we instinctively feel, ugh, this is wrong. But Meursault simply doesn't feel that, ugh. He notices the hurt. He even asks the neighbor politely, what has the dog done? But he doesn't feel the urge to interpret it and attach a moral meaning to it, like, this is wrong. And perhaps with this, Camus is trying to make us feel how disturbing moral neutrality is to society. It makes you wonder, can morality even exist without emotion? Because most of what we think is right or wrong comes from an instinctive feeling about the matter in question. Cheating feels bad, betrayal feels bad, loyalty feels good, responsibility feels good. So we declare these are universal truths. Let me know what you think. Morality seems to be powered entirely by what we feel is good or bad, and someone who doesn't share those feelings is often cast as a villain. This becomes clearer as our story reaches its climax. Meursault becomes friends with one of his neighbors, whose name is Raymond. Raymond has a mistress who he suspects is cheating on him, so he decides to punish her. He lays out his plan to Meursault. He wanted to write her a letter, one that would hit her hard, but at the same time say things that would make her sorry and miss him. Then, after she came back to him, he'd sleep with her, and as soon as he'd finished, he'd spit in her face and throw her out. I told him I thought that would be really a way to punish her. It's quite the plan. Tell me that you didn't feel an instinctive need to moralize upon hearing this. Anyone with the normal moral compass would probably think that Raymond is a blatantly violent, manipulative, petty, and just morally nauseating person. But Meursault simply doesn't. Raymond asks if this is a good plan to punish her, and he replies, yes, functionally speaking, it is. This is where things start to escalate quickly. After Raymond accomplishes his plan and beats up his mistress and humiliates her, he is targeted by some Arabs who are associated with her brother. It happens one time that Raymond invites Meursault to visit a friend of his who owns a beach house. As they were walking on the beach, the Arabs approach them and pull out a knife. Raymond is well prepared and pulls out a gun, but Meursault manages to convince him not to shoot and to try to take them on in a manual fight instead. Raymond hands over the gun to Meursault, and the situation de-escalates with some minor injuries, and everyone backs off. But later that day, Meursault goes out for a walk on the beach on his own. Soon the heat of the sun burns him so intensely, and he tries to seek the closest refuge, which just happens to be the resting spot of one of those Arabs. As he sees Meursault approaching, he pulls out the knife again. Meursault instinctively reaches for the gun that he still had, but the heat, the brightness of the sun reflected off that knife directly into his eyes, threatening to blind him, the tiredness, all conspire to make him pull the trigger. And he does. Then 4 more times, into that still lifeless body. Why society demands meaning. And so Meursault's trial for murder begins. The first question he's asked doesn't seem to have anything to do with the murder at all. It was about whether he was upset by his mother's death and how he didn't seem to display emotion on that day. I undoubtedly loved Mama very much, but that didn't mean anything. Every normal person wishes sometimes the people they love would die. His again devastatingly honest answer doesn't offer him any favors. It's not even a contradiction at this point, it's perfectly consistent with his worldview. Love exists, but meaning doesn't. He's not wrong in describing something most people experience at a fleeting moment but never articulate: the wish that the person they love would die. It's often a wish born out of a desire for something like peace or freedom or independence, but most people suppress or reinterpret these thoughts because they contradict the social myth of pure unconditional love. And from there, it goes sharply downhill for him. During the prosecution session, he's asked questions about why he had put his mother in a care home, why he didn't visit her so often, why he not only drank coffee next to her coffin but also smoked a cigarette, why he didn't seem bothered in the slightest during or after the funeral, and rather not only went swimming the next day and seduced a woman, but also watched a comedy movie of all things. Prosecution made it a point that a stranger might offer a coffee, but that a son should refuse it when in the presence of the body of the woman who brought him into this world. Every little detail around how Meursault felt and what he did around his mother's death was intensely scrutinized, that eventually his lawyer shouted, "Is this man on trial for having buried his mother or for having killed a man?" The trial indeed was no longer about the actual wrongdoing of killing a man at all, but about Meursault's indifference and his failure to conform to the emotional narrative of society. It's as if justice isn't even society's goal at all. Above all else, it seems to need people to perform the right feelings at the right times in order to preserve the illusion of meaning. But why is it that society so desperately needs meaning to exist? The following scene illustrates this beautifully. The judge asks Meursault what motivated his crime. I said rather quickly, muddling up my words a bit and completely unaware of how ridiculous I sounded, "It was because of the sun." Laughter rang out in the courtroom. That's it. The perfectly absurd reason of the passing of some celestial object that happened to align with a healthy dose of chance. Literally nothing more to it. And no one could bring themselves to taking it seriously. How could anyone accept a meaningless crime? There has to be some meaning behind it, be it rage or revenge or jealousy or theft or anything really but meaninglessness. The judge seems particularly bothered by why Meursault waited before firing the second shot. There has to be a reason. I started to tell him it was wrong to keep going on about this. It simply wasn't important. There literally was none. In desperation, the judge points a Christ figure in Meursault's face and asks if he believed in God, to which Meursault answers, of course, that he didn't. At which point the judge explodes. "Do you want my life to have no meaning?" Here is the crux of the matter. The judge's faith gives his world coherence. In his world, suffering has meaning. Sin and wrongdoing must be punished. And the whole concept about right and wrong is real, not made up. This is the worldview he has built his entire life around. He needs to believe that love or grief or suffering or justice have a higher significance. Most people build their comfort around there being a higher justification to the chaos of existence. When an event carries a meaning, we can tell ourselves that people behaved a certain way for some reason. That harm followed a pattern, like someone abusing their partner because they are toxic. That relationships matter in some stable, comforting sense. Even suffering becomes easier to bear when it seems to belong to a grand story, like becoming stronger by overcoming a limitation and winning against impossible circumstances. Without it, events and life in general feel too unpredictable when they don't follow a pattern. Our moral system rests on emotional agreements we make with each other, like betrayal is bad and loyalty is good. And when someone doesn't participate in that agreement, the whole system feels threatened. Camus' ideology around what he calls the absurd challenges all that. In his view, there is simply no inherent meaning in anything in life besides the meaning we decide to attach to things. Just like we decided that this piece of paper has a certain value. None of our values reflect anything beyond collective habit and meaning making. And to some people, this idea is unbearable. Someone like Meursault, who embodies absurdity, is dangerous without even doing anything beyond refusing to participate in collective meaning making. If one man refuses to pretend life has meaning, it threatens the illusion keeping everybody else afloat. And so he is sentenced to public execution by the guillotine on the grounds of being a soulless monster who didn't cry at his mother's funeral. Freedom, accepting the absurd. As Meursault returns to his prison cell, he is occupied by one thought only: whether there is any chance, no matter how small, he could escape his impending death. Since the courtroom failed to explain him through morals or theology, the responsibility of making sense of him was passed entirely into the hands of the chaplain, a man who not only believes that meaning is real, but is divinely mandated. Meursault is visited by the chaplain who talks to him incessantly about God and salvation and redemption and questions him whether he really never wished for a different life than his own. At some point, Meursault has had enough. He had so little time left in this world, and this silly man is wasting it. For the first time in his life, he bursts into anger and shouts at the chaplain who seems so sure of himself and the story he insists on imposing on others, and told him exactly how silly it all is. Nothing mattered, and I knew very well why. He also knew why. From the depths of my future, throughout all this absurd life I had lived, a gathering wind swept towards me, stripping bare along its path everything that had been possible in the years gone by, years that seemed just as unreal as the ones that lay ahead. Why should the death of other people or a mother's love matter so much? Why should I care about his God, the lives, the destinies we choose when one unique destiny had chosen me? And in that moment, something clicks for him. The world is indifferent. It never promised him anything, and it was never against him to begin with. It never vowed to save him, or to deliver justice, or to offer a different destiny. The fact that he was to be executed for not crying at his mom's funeral was simply part of the world's absurdity and indifference. It just didn't matter anymore whether he died tomorrow or in 20 years, whether he suffered a senseless execution or died a natural death. Those were only possibilities among many, all of which lead to the same final destination. None has any more significance than the other. In that moment, he opened himself for the first time to the tender indifference of the world and realized he's been happy, that he is happy in this moment and that he will die happy. The moment he stopped expecting things to be different than they are and accepted the absurdity of existence, he was free. And in that moment, he felt ready to restart his life. He reflected on how his mother, near the end of her life, must have understood this when she took on a fiancé and restarted her life. So close to death, Mama must have felt set free, ready to live once more. No one had the right to cry over her. And I as well. I too felt ready to start life all over again. I suppose much of the stress we experience on a daily basis comes from the meanings we attach to things that don't inherently carry any. My partner didn't take out the trash. It must mean that he doesn't care. I don't manage to get a job. It must mean that I suck and the world must be against me, when the world simply couldn't care less. Those meanings and the illusions they construct give life a lot of its texture and beauty, but also become a source of suffering when they don't align with what we want. I suppose it's freeing to know that much of our beautiful narratives are invented because it gives the capacity to detach from a particular outcome, but also from societal expectation and judgments. To get married by a particular age, to have kids even if you don't want to go to university, or otherwise it means that you are stupid and uneducated. Once one stops imagining things to be different than they really are, disappointments no longer feel like a theft of something that was never promised to begin with. Genuinely beautiful book, so do consider reading it if you haven't already. It's only 100 pages, and if you have already read it, then do let me know what you think. While to many it's freeing to realize that you could simply live your life the way that you want because nothing has an inherent meaning, to others this exact freedom feels horrifying. If you want to know why we unknowingly hate freedom so much, you might enjoy this next video.